Dane Bradshaw called the game. He's joining JC, Phil, and myself now. We're, of course, here till 2 o'clock. We're not going to keep Dane until 2, although we'd love to do that. But he was excellent on the broadcast on the SEC network. He's one of the fine voices of college basketball. I texted him that last night and told him really appreciate what he does for the entire sport. Mike Morgan connected us, and we are so glad to have you today, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate the compliment. I don't know if you mean it or you just needed a guess, but you warmed me up good. How could I say no?
Yeah, we're pretty good at buttering it up around here.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding, man. No, you are fantastic. There's a reason why they have you do it. So here's the thing. Actually, the University of South Carolina might look into putting you on the payroll because you've been courtside the last 2 Tuesdays. So don't change anything. Are you going to Are you calling the game next week when Ole Miss is in town?
I don't have them, but I guess I'm sure there could be some influence if the Gamecock fans really wanted me on there. And look, it's not quite up there with the quarter zip trend or anything like that. So you guys have your own good luck charm. But no, there's nothing to do with me on the call. It's been awesome to see it firsthand. I thought yesterday's game will be even more rewarding for South Carolina to do it on the road, of course, against Tennessee. And I still think Tennessee, could win the league. And I actually think Tennessee, we'll see what happens Saturday between them and Kentucky. It's kind of a week-to-week league, but I think Tennessee, the win over Tennessee, not only I think Tennessee could be the better team at the end of the year than Kentucky, but also doing it on the road. It wasn't as kind of sexy of a game and entertaining. It was just ugly, sloppy, missed layups by Tennessee, fouls and all that stuff. But man, and you didn't have the stuff that you're going to put on your billboards and media guides of the court storming. But all in all, it was more impressive for their resume and more impactful than even the win against Kentucky.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I'm with you. I've got a lot of respect for Tennessee. Rick Barnes has worn 3 different shades of orange in his career, and he's been unbelievable everywhere he's been. Dane, as you well know, I know you know him. He's an outstanding basketball coach.
Yeah.
We just had a clip coming into the program here after our open, and it was something that you said at the end of the call last night about, guys, Tom Hart had asked you a question earlier in the game, and you said, Kentucky, Bama, Auburn, Tennessee, those are the teams that kind of are that upper tier. But it's hard now at this point in time. You're 8 games into the year, Dane. I want to press you on that a little bit and see where the Gamecocks fall because they just keep proving it, but they're proving it with their style of play. They're making people play their brand of basketball.
Yeah, and when you look at who can win the league, I don't know that anybody's going to maybe go 15-3 this year, but maybe 14-4. It'd be a stretch. 13-5. I guess you could possibly tie. So that's if I had to go back on it, I'd say, look, I think South Carolina can beat anybody in this league. Will they win the league at the end of the day? I'm still not sure, but man, it does. You sit there and see what they've done, and that's kind of where it's like, well, why not them? And it takes you a while to come around to it because they lack some of the star power. And you're like, all right, they can beat anybody, but anybody can beat them too. But hey, they've got more going right with them than they do wrong. And I think they clearly have an identity. Cooper's been tremendous at point guard. I mean, he's just like having just a veteran out there. It's like, sending the responsible older brother off to the store with the kids. Like you know that he's going to be in charge and everything's going to be okay. Like having an extra parent out there. And I really have gotten my admiration for Lamont Paris has continued to grow even last year. Just the confidence he has in his system. By no means any arrogance. Just there's zero insecurity about that guy and what they do. And I've played when I was at Tennessee. I had 2 different coaches, one under Buzz Peterson, and then 2 years into it, Bruce Pearl came. And there were times when we were changing early on. We were changing our identity, and all of a sudden the players aren't bought in as much when you're trying to do something different every other game. But Lamont Paris has such belief in his system and what they've been able to do at Wisconsin, how it worked in Chattanooga. and zero panic at all when they weren't having the year they wanted. Like some young coaches would do, is say, God, we got to get the best players available and just get rich quick. It's like, no, we'll take some basketball players over athletes, and that can have a lot of success in the SEC, where it's easy to fall into the trap of getting the best athletes available versus basketball players.
Yeah, Dane, you've watched a lot of. I got two questions for you. The first one, you've watched South Carolina through the years, and this program, with the exception of one magical March in 2017, has struggled. Tennessee's had 5 different coaches, and it seems like they're always cycling back up during this last period. For a program like that, it's just kind of stuck. That hasn't really had sustained success since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming and I'm not saying they're going to emulate Wisconsin, but becoming kind of that special preparation. Gosh, this guy, the difference with these guys, they win because of their system. Becoming that kind of program, is that a smart move? When you consider everything and that they've tried a lot of different stuff. And Frank Martin, when he was here, his defense, frankly, was special prep. But I think the difference is Lamont's got the offense working kind of in conjunction with the defense. So it's one fluid kind of deal.
Yeah.
Do you think that was smart, for South Carolina to head in that direction, to say, hey, look, we may not always right now get the best players in the country, but we can have one of the best systems and have one of the better teams by doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point. The first team that comes to mind really is Tony Bennett in Virginia. The way he came into the ACC and said, look, we can't just try to do what the other teams are able to do with their elite talent and their recruiting. And so that system changed everything for Virginia to where that sustained success is there. And so you go outside of the league, that's the first example I think of inside the SEC. You look at Nate Oates at Alabama, you look at Bruce Pearl at Auburn, and you start to see some of these non-traditional basketball schools that are all of a sudden commonplace in the top 25 now. And we keep going back to that sustained success phrase, but it's not always just got to be the Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, because that's a good basketball job. It gets a quicker recovery at times when you have the coaching turnover. But I think there's just great evidence there from places like Alabama and Auburn, where you never thought of them as basketball schools, but you look up after the last 5 years, and by all means, they certainly are. And so why can't South Carolina do that? And if anything, I think Lamont Paris is going to not only bring greater talent in, he's just got to be careful of making sure they fit what he does. And I don't think he's the type of guy that's going to get greedy, because sometimes these coaches get success early on, and all of a sudden they can start getting players they ordinarily couldn't get. And then they get them and they're like, oh, gosh, it doesn't really fit what we do.
Yep.
And so, but I don't see that being an issue.
Yeah, speaking of coaches, Chris Beard is off to have you had Ole Miss at all this year?
I had him one time. Yeah.
Tell us about the, because Gamecocks have 2 games coming up. That's kind of the twofer in February for Carolina. Is Ole Miss haven't played them yet. They're 18-3 as well, and won a big game against their rival last night. Give us your opinion on Ole Miss, because it's kind of silly. And I've always thought Chris Beard was one of the best coaches in America, bar none.
Yeah.
But what are they like? Just from your standpoint.
And help me, I don't have South Carolina scheduled. You guys have them at home or on the road?
Yeah, next Tuesday at home.
It's next Tuesday at home, but then they go to Oxford in a couple of weeks. It's kind of like 2 weeks, and you have those teams you play 1 week and then 2 weeks later you're back at it.
Because I think Ole Miss is a team that they're good, but they're great at home, really good, and they had a record crowd last night. So the energy's there. I had Chris Beard as my preseason SEC Coach of the Year for a couple reasons. One, as you alluded to, he can coach his butt off. Number 2, the guys that returning, the cupboard was not bare at Ole Miss. It didn't mean they had a ton of guys returning, but they had some key elements there. When you look at Brakefield and Matthew Morrell, and they were well coached. Kermit Davis did a good job down there. They had some injuries go against them. They didn't win as many close games as they would like, but it wasn't like he had, and Chris Beard will tell you this. He goes, look, I didn't come in here and have to try to, teach effort and tell guys how to, dive on the floor for a loose ball and go after rebounds. That wasn't a problem. And so for those reasons, I'm not totally surprised at how well he is doing down there. And they've got good guard play. The kid Murray comes from St. Peter's. He was part of that historic St. Peter's team that made that NCAA run. He's kind of just an undersized underdog point guard that can make big shots, but has that confidence to him. Different than Cooper, plays with a little bit more burst to him, and can be a little bit more up and down. But gosh, they play with a lot of confidence. 2 7-footers, some great rim protection. But look, I had them when they went to Tennessee. They were undefeated. They got blown out by Tennessee, but at that time, I thought it was more about how good Tennessee can be rather than, hey, Ole Miss is a fluke. I didn't think that was the case. I thought Ole Miss just walked into a tough environment where Tennessee was hitting on all cylinders. So they've had a couple ups and downs, but I think Ole Miss is going to be on the right side of the bubble when it's all said and done.
That voice you hear is Dane Bradshaw of the SEC Network joining us here on Inside the Gamecocks. It's 11/17, the final day of January. We're about to turn the page to the stretch run for this league and see where this sucker winds up. I'll kind of slide back to the Gamecocks in just a second, but playing off of JC's questions, kind of dancing around the SEC a little bit. How deep is this league, in your opinion, compared to years past? We've talked about the upper echelon, but boy, the middle class sure is big, isn't it?
It is, and you've had some pleasant surprises and not so pleasant. I think most of us came into the year thinking Missouri would be right there. They've had some injuries and not having the year they expected to have. Arkansas is a little bit lost right now, which I think is being kind. But you've had these nice surprises with teams like South Carolina, like Ole Miss, and gosh, how about Chris Jans? Year 2, he's got his team maybe going back-to-back NCAA tournaments. It's probably the least talked about great coaching job out there. And so, yeah, the depth is real. Going into this, and LSU's played better here as of late. And so, but when we entered conference play, this is kind of an outdated statement, but when we entered conference play, I thought, you know what, I'm not saying 12 teams are making the NCAA tournament, but 12 out of 14 felt like, hey, we got a chance to still meet our goal of making the NCAA tournament. Usually you have a lot more poor non-conference situations where you go, all right, boy, those guys aren't any good. They're gonna have to beat Kentucky at Rupp, and they're gonna have to go on the road and win at Tennessee if they want to have any shot at improving their resume. But that wasn't the case with the SEC. They schedule hard. They're winning some of those tough non-conference games, and now you enter the conference play. And man, it just seems like quad one win after opportunity after another. And that's what the NCAA gives the most credence to. Their selection is, how many quad one games and wins did you have? And to have that opportunity night in, night out, it can look like a bloodbath on your schedule. But hey, you want to go to the big dance, and that's what everybody's playing for. The more opportunities you get, the better. And that just, as you guys know, wasn't always the case in the SEC, and it's been a turn for the better in the past 10 years.
To back up your comments, of the 5 remaining road games that the Gamecocks have, depending on what happens tonight in Athens with the Dogs and the Tide, all 5 could be quad one opportunities. Right now, 4 of the 5 are. Georgia's knocking on the door of making it a quad one chance for South Carolina when they walk into Stegman this weekend. I want to quickly ask you this, too, about Dalton Connect. I mean, this guy is unbelievable, Dane. He's going to the NBA, and he's got all the tools, and he's going to play a long time up there. He's an elite scorer, at least as fluid and mature of a basketball player from an offensive standpoint I can remember in this league, and how he kind of takes it all on his shoulders. He goes out and just does his thing. I understand last night listening to the broadcast, he's such a gym rat, which is really neat to hear. But the question I want to ask you is, in particular with the Vols, he's had a hell of a run here of 6 straight games. He's had a hell of a season, but this run of 6 straight games, he's putting points up all over the place. Do you feel like the rest of the group is just kind of waiting around for him to make something happen, and they're just kind of all in slow motion? That's kind of what it felt like to me. And maybe I'm way off here, but it just felt like if he wasn't going to do it, there wasn't really anybody who was going to take the bull by the horns to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Rick Barnes said something similar in his post game. He said, look, we can't just sit around and watch Dalton. And I felt that way. And now I didn't think Dalton Connect would in the game as well as he did. Because my point was, hey, the supporting cast is going to have to make some shots if they want a chance to come back. And lo and behold, he almost brought him back on his own. But that's not sustainable. And briefly, there's other guys in the league averaging 20. You look at Antonio Reeves, Mark Sears. But the way Dalton Connect is doing it with some of these scoring outbursts, and whether it's on the road or at home, to me, he's just in another category right now in terms of SEC Player of the Year. And I don't know if he can sustain this, but anything close to it, it's not just how many points he's scoring, but how he's doing it, when he's doing it, in the biggest moments, and when their back's against the wall. But this is a Tennessee team that has had fragile offensive confidence before Dalton Connect got there. But when Dalton wasn't there, Vescovi, Ziegler, they had to just try to shoot their way out of it. And now with Connect being there, I do think it's some of, all right, well, tonight's not our night. Let's just let Dalton do his thing. And there's a big balance there, because you do say, hey, get number 3 the ball as many times as you can. And then there's also, kind of sitting around and watching. And I don't think that's what Tennessee wants. And I'm sure it's going to be addressed in their film room.
No, and Rick Barnes, it absolutely will be. As it pertains to this group here that we cover, Talon Cooper, as you mentioned, Derek Scott, our man Derek, the voice of the Gamecocks, calls it old man basketball. It's like playing ball against your old man, your dad.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm younger, I'm more athletic. How do you keep kicking my rear end every time we step on the floor? And that's Talon. He clearly he's the heartbeat of this team. At the same time, Dan, I mean, last night Studi comes back. He's been out. We talked to Derek yesterday. One of the questions we had about Miles was, where would they pick and choose to put him in the game? Because things really have been clicking with him not in there. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just meant sometimes you don't want to mess with flow, right? Yeah. And then he comes in last night, didn't miss a shot. He hits those free throws at the end. He confidently let the 20,000 folks in there know that he wasn't going to miss anymore. But it just seems night in and night out, whether it's Studi or Josh Gray has all of a sudden come out of nowhere in the last couple of weeks and arrived. You've got Colin Murray-Boyles, you got Zach Davis, you got Jacoby Wright. Somebody every night is stepping up and doing something that they need them to do to win basketball games. How do you explain? What do you see when you watch this entire group play from that selflessness, unselfish game of basketball, like the way that they do it?
And when you have a balanced team like this and the depth that they have, it's stating the obvious, but you're best when everybody contributes. And that's what South Carolina has right now. And it might not be just things jumping off the stat sheet, but Josh Gray, hey, did he hold his own against some good big men for Tennessee? He more than held his own and had an impact on the game. I thought Studi was going to have to hit 3 to 4, maybe even 5 threes last night. And boy, did he step up and do it. And the other big thing there that was so important was the versatility of Tennessee's lineup and how they can switch some, and they can have different guys guarding the 4 and 5, and with BJ Mack and who you want guarding Mack, and how that can work against or for South Carolina. When you put Studi in the game, now all of a sudden at the 4 spot, that forced Tennessee's big men to have to guard Mack a little bit more on the perimeter. Now Mack didn't convert the way he wanted to, but those pick and pops, like South Carolina, they didn't score a ton of points, but I thought they got some really good looks. And Lamont Parrish had mentioned this to me in pregame. He said, against teams that like to switch, we'll try to run some stuff that get them to switch. And then now let's run the play that we want, and so that's some NBA stuff that occurs. I thought they really got some good matchups, even though the percentages weren't off the charts. And I love what he talks about, how these guys are self-aware, and you see it that Zachary Davis didn't say, what did he go 0 for 5 or something last night? Like, would he like to score more? Yeah, but I think he's pretty happy with that road win and knows that he helped his team by playing the best defense that he could.
With all that said, we'll let you run on this final one here. Again, it's wow, it's been special, but we all well know that you don't get into the dance with just 6 conference wins. They still got a lot of games to play. They have not been shy about beating that drum, saying, "Hey, somebody look at us and pay attention." All paying attention now, Dane. And when they walk into Stagnant on Saturday, everybody's going to know how well this team's playing. And every game here on out, I mean, they've got the target on their back because they're a good basketball team. What do they need to improve to continue to stay in the win column and build towards March? With everything that's gone right, there's always something to work on. What do you think that might be for these guys?
Yeah, to me, the consistency at the 3-point line, and look, other than to start SEC play, they have been pretty consistent. I just think that's such a key. As more and more teams in the SEC are starting to become 3-point happy and try to spread you out with more shooters, the way they're only allowing teams to make less than 6 threes a game. That might not have seemed like much, 5-6 years ago, but with everybody loving the 3-point shot now, that's a huge deal. And they're when they're making 10 a game and you're holding them to 6, that's a big spread there. All of a sudden you're plus 12 from the 3-point line and the way they can defend and not turn it over. So that to me is probably the biggest thing, is just continuing to shooting that 35% or better type range from 3. And you sit there and you say, look, 6-2, and you're right, they do have a long way to go. But the beauty is, as we talked about, there's not a lot of bad loss opportunities, on the schedule either, that are going to kill you. And so if you can find a way to get to 10 league wins, I'd like to think that's enough. I know you want more, but 10 league wins in a pretty darn tough SEC, you would like to think would be enough for them.
Yeah, I would think so, especially with what they've done over the last 7 days. It's they've got the resume now. Just got to keep doing what they're doing. We'll let you run. I know you've got a busy day. We'll send Coach Paris and the SID Michael DeBates a quick email and see if we can't get you on the call for, let's see, all 10 remaining games on the schedule to help them. I know you're a Vol at heart because you played there. Everybody knows that. That's okay, but it'd be nice for you to, be on the call.
Hey, you know what? It's going to be, I'm thrilled for South Carolina, because you like being the underdog, and that's a fun role to play. But all of a sudden, when you go on the road and the crowd is getting bigger because you're coming to town, that's a fun, rewarding feeling too. Mm-hmm. And Coach Paris talked about the need for more brand recognition in South Carolina, and they're starting to get it to whereas before, I bet Georgia wasn't that, tickets weren't too expensive. They're starting to get up there now, I'm sure.
Yeah, you got that right. Be a lot of folks barking in Stegman on Saturday. Hey, man, thank you so much for your time. Great stuff last night, and really appreciate everything you do for college basketball. You're a pro, and we'd love to have you back soon.
Anytime. Thanks a lot. Congrats to the Gamecocks.
All right, Dane. Thank you, man.
See you, buddy.
There you go, Dane Bradshaw with the SEC work on the call last night with Tom Hart and Alyssa Lang, courtside.